Emma has a similar response around kind of planning out. Emma, are you willing to speak to that a little bit in terms of making a list of tasks and goals?
For sure. I Due to several reasons, it's difficult for me to have a very specific, strict schedule every day.
Mhm.
And I really wish I could have a space that's just for studying, but that's just not something that can happen in my house.
Mhm.
So instead of, for me, when I try to do those things, I end up getting disappointed with myself when I don't do those things and I don't live
Mhm.
up to the schedule I try to set for myself. So having a very gentle set of goals that I want to be able to do this, I want to be able to do this. If I can't do that, it's okay. That's been really helpful for me.
That's awesome. And I heard it kind of this tone of grace that you have for yourself, that it's okay if I don't get everything done in a certain amount of time. I think that's really important too. I think that working from home, especially under these scary conditions, can breed a lot of anxiety and a lot of pressure on ourselves to get things done and really have it all under control. And I think having a little bit of grace is really lovely. And then the last person who chimed in was Claire. She said having a routine and getting some physical activity in every day. I think that's a great point, that really sticking to a routine can be useful. And Claire, I don't know if you want to speak to how that's benefited you in terms of physical activity or routine.
Yeah, sure. For me, I'm actually not taking classes right now, so in the beginning, of I guess like spring quarter, I wasn't like it was really hard for me to feel motivated and get anything done. So just
Mhm.
having like that sort of to-do list for things to do every day, and then just going out for a walk or doing some yoga at home, I think has been really helpful for me too.
Wonderful. Yeah, I think getting our bodies moving, especially when we do feel contained inside, is really important. And having some routine when we don't have that much going on is really great too. It gives us a sense of purpose. So I think you all covered a lot of what I was going to share, and I'm glad it came from you because it's like you're on the ground, you're doing this work. I think it's important that this comes from you. So some of the things I had were starting the day right. I joked with one of my students that I saw that it is nice to just change out of the sweatpants you go to sleep in and put on a new pair of sweatpants for class or work. Um, Really just getting the day started with like a shower or whatever your routine would have been when you were back doing everything in person could be really nice. It really is a nice way to kind of reset and feel ready and get in the right mindset. And even if you're just putting on another pair of sweatpants, that's okay. I have here scheduling self care. So the days can kind of blend into one another and really escape us. So, really taking time to create breaks in our day, stepping outside for fresh air, staying hydrated. I think sometimes when we're in the office or in class, we have a bottle of water in front of us, and sometimes it takes a little while for us to realize, oh, we should probably do that at home too. Um, Things like that can be really helpful. Connecting with others. This is one that we didn't talk about yet. So I think the idea of working from home, even though we were on Zoom all day, that could be a bit exhausting. It can be a bit isolating to be at home and on your own. And there are people that you probably saw after class or after a work shift where you might say, oh, hey, let's go get a cup of coffee. We don't do that anymore. So being intentional about being able to kind of make face-to-face contact through Skype or Zoom or FaceTime could be really helpful and make you feel less isolated. Someone spoke to this a little bit in terms of creating a physical space, and that's actually the next one, so I can preview that. But setting limits, and so sometimes when we're working from home, it's harder to keep defined work hours. So limiting your efforts to the work day and doing your best to avoid checking email constantly and letting your work day sort of seep into your personal time and the time that you might have with roommates or family is important. And the last one someone covered in terms of designating a workspace. And this gets really hard if we're living in smaller spaces, but believe me, it can be done. Um, I myself have had to take on that challenge, and it's really hard sometimes to think, where can I possibly designate a space? So even if it's just a corner of an existing room, being in the work mindset in this corner of my room makes me much happier when I can exit work and go home, so to speak, to the rest of my house. So I'm going to move on to self-care. I think that, this is a unique time because we always talk about self-care being important, but I think now we really have to think about being intentional about self-care and planning ahead a little bit. So I'm going to turn this question to the group again, and I have the chat up. I think that it's important to know for ourselves, because this can be very individual. What are some signs that things are just like you're not yourself? Things are not going so great. You're kind of burning out. You don't feel totally yourself. What are some signs for all of you? And feel free to list a few and use the chat, or you could chime in on the audio. I have one response so far, so I'm going to keep waiting for a couple more seconds. Signs of burnout. So far I've got, I want to sleep a lot. Yeah, I hear you. And not focused at all. That totally makes sense. It's really hard to focus when we don't have our normal routine. Our productivity suffers. That's totally a sign of burnout, that you feel like you're working on something forever and it doesn't get done. Somebody said physical symptoms. Yeah, and they mentioned headaches and fatigue. I think that can manifest in a lot of different ways. We can feel sort of achy or tension in the neck or back. My head constantly hurting since everything is on the screen. That's a really good point. I've heard of a lot of people who are prone to migraines, getting more migraines, and really needing to be intentional about focusing their eyes somewhere else sometimes as a break. And that leads to me not wanting to do simple things like cleaning or cooking. Anytime I start feeling totally hopeless about my situation or spend all of my time on things like social media, sleeping, or other non-productive things. Yeah, I think that's a great point, that this idea of like building in a break for yourself could be helpful, because otherwise you might burn out and then just need a break for a long period of time. So I appreciate these signs of burnout. I'm gonna list a few others here. So feeling easily frustrated or irritable could be a sign of burnout. Being a bit short-tempered, blaming others for things that are not going well, feeling anxious or stressed, engaging in poor self-care, not really showering every day, letting a few things slide, feeling really exhausted or overwhelmed, experiencing indifference or apathy. So, it doesn't really matter how I do in this class. Or just to isolate beyond social distancing. Of course, we're all isolated right now, but I think sometimes we can feel an urge to, like somebody said, like sleep more. And then things like low mood, sadness, or depression. And as somebody said, feeling sort of unproductive, this idea of ineffectiveness or not feeling adequate, or like you're doing a good enough job, can come up. So this paints sort of a blah picture, right? But the good thing is there are things we can do to mitigate burnout, stay ahead of it. And there's this idea of self-care that's sort of tossed around a lot, but I like to think of the way that we can engage in self-care in two different categories. So there's things like soothing self-care, things to do to soothe ourselves, to calm ourselves down, to really regulate our parasympathetic nervous system, and then to distract ourselves. So things that really just take our mind off of things. Are there any coping strategies or self-care that anyone's willing to share in the chat? Painting, yoga, meditation, big one for me. Yeah, those are both good soothing and distracting strategies. Cooking myself a healthy meal, that's a great way to engage in self-care, because you, not only is the process kind of fun, but you're feeding yourself and nourishing yourself. Um, Animal Crossing. I'm curious to hear more about that, Jasmine. And then Gloria says dancing. That's lovely. Jasmine, are you willing to talk about Animal Crossing to us?
I don't really know how to explain Animal Crossing. It's just a Nintendo video game, but
Ah,
it's very soothing because you have your own island and you do small tasks. And it's just really like, it's very like small task based, and like you can accrue bells, or you can like decorate your house, or you can meet your neighbors and do things for your neighbors. So it's like a
that's awesome.
very, like a kind of like a simulation game, but it's really cute looking, and it's also very like you actually feel like you're accomplishing things
I think
while
that's
like
key.
relaxing.
Yeah, like that sense of productivity. Thank you for informing me. Clearly, I'm out of the loop on video games. That's awesome. I think that's so key. Like exerting control over the things we do have control over, even if it's in a simulated environment, is really great. Thank you for explaining that. And that could be both soothing and distracting, right? So video games have dual purposes in that way. Uh, Yoga, reading, cooking, listening to music. Someone really loves Animal Crossing. It's like real life, but no stakes. That's so true. It really takes the pressure off, it seems. Playing with my pets, they put a smile on my face when I'm not feeling my best. Yeah, and you can start to think about the coping strategies that go well for you and whether they fit into soothing, like something to really calm you down, or something to take your mind off things. And this is sort of how this plays out in these two categories. So I have a section here about COVID-friendly self-care. You know, it's so funny when doing this, putting this together, because a lot of what we do for self-care, we can still do. And I think we lose sight of that. It feels like the world is sort of ending, but it's okay. We still have some of the strategies that will work well for us. I think the key to practicing self-care at the moment might be more about really being proactive about the things we have control over, taking regular breaks, eating healthy meals, hydrating, exercising daily. We can do all of those things still. So it's very frequent that I hear from students, oh, like everything is over, I can't do anything. And we have to challenge ourselves, like, is that really true? One idea that we've really used for both employees of the university and for students is buddying up with a classmate or a coworker to avoid burnout. So kind of saying like, this is really hard. I'm wondering if we could check in on each other and agree to either touch base regularly or throughout the day. That could be helpful. And I think a lot of people are getting outside. A lot of people are walking. It seems like America's new favorite pastime to go for a walk. And of course, continuing to social distance. It could be fun to check out a new area of your neighborhood or even drive to a different neighborhood to take a walk. To really take advantage of the fact that there's not a lot of traffic on the road right now most days. So taking a bike ride could be helpful. And then even just between meetings and in between classes, it'd be really cool to just designate a space to stretch a little bit. A yoga mat or towel could be helpful, just a visual cue to be like, I should probably move. I haven't moved in a couple of hours. And just use that couple of minutes to move your body. A couple of other ideas are just inhaling fresh air for a few minutes, calming the body down that day. That way, I think we're lucky to be in San Diego where the weather is so nice. So stepping outside for a few minutes could be helpful, even if it's just on a balcony or out your front door. It really makes a big difference to be in the sun and to really feel that you're breathing in fresh air and engaging in deep breathing in that moment.
So
I think we
question from Marissa here.
Oh, I have a question. Okay, yes, Marissa.
Yes, hi. I had a question about it was on the slides before with the soothing versus distracting self-care.
Yeah.
I was wondering like if there is a good time for like soothing or distracting, like how can you like determine which one you should use like as opposed to the other?
Yeah, I think they could serve similar but different functions. That's a really good question. I think when we are activated and we feel like, okay, our body's going into fight or flight, like, oh, this is really stressful for me, it could be helpful to engage in more soothing strategies, because something like deep breathing, for instance, can get us to calm down our nervous system in a way that regulates our stress response. I think if we are finding ourselves ruminating or thinking a lot about one thing, engaging in distraction can be helpful. Doing something that's really enjoyable to you and that you know you're not going to think about your really stressful test if you are watching this really great show or painting or doing a digital get together with friends. It's just not gonna, like, those two thoughts aren't gonna be in your head at the same time. So I think it depends on what your stressors are at the moment and whether it's something you feel like, okay, what do I need right now? Do I really need to calm down? Or is it something that I'm thinking about a lot and I wanna escape? Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Oh yeah, of course. So I'm going to flip ahead. Yes, so I think that in terms of these other strategies, the other points I want to make is that when we're adjusting to any new situation, we're going to be tired. So as we're adjusting to a new situation of working from home, making sure you prioritize sleep and make every effort to really just rest each evening can be really helpful. And also really just normalizing for yourself that as we adjust, and hopefully this has improved over the last few weeks, it's normal to feel really tired when we're making big transitions. And the last point I want to make is just thinking about whether you need to be watching the news all the time or on social media all the time. Some people find it helpful to just pick a time of the day to review that information and then distance from it by distracting with something else. So I want to put one of these things into action and practice a little bit of deep breathing, and feel free, you can turn your cameras off for this if you're not comfortable, but feel free to just close your eyes, get kind of comfortable in your chair, make sure you have both feet on the ground. Fold your hands on your belly. The idea here is that you just want to, when you breathe in, you're not doing anything really special other than breathing in a way that makes your belly get really full, like as if you're inflating a balloon, and then you just breathe out. And I think a lot of times people feel really stressed out when they do breathing. They're like, am I doing it right? If you're getting air, you're fine. I think if the key is you really want to inflate the diaphragm to get that really deep breath and get a lot of oxygen into your lungs. So let's try this together. We're going to breathe in slowly. You're going to want to fill your belly with a normal breath. Try not to breathe too heavily. The hands should move up as you breathe in, as if you're filling up a balloon. Try to avoid your chest moving. If you notice your shoulders moving as you breathe, you really want to breathe in through the stomach. And that's it. So you just breathe in slowly to the count of 5, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then slowly exhale. And then sometimes people want to pause between breaths. You can do that. So we're going to try this for the next 2 minutes, and then I'd love to hear your experience. Just breathe in slowly and exhale. Okay, when you're ready, you can open your eyes, turn back your cameras, And then let's discuss. Okay, I see most people still have their cameras off, so I'm going to wait another moment in case you're in deep relaxation and need some time. Okay. All right. Is anyone willing to share their experience with taking a few deep breaths? Are we feeling better, worse, the same?
I'm definitely feeling a little bit better, but it was more difficult than I was expecting to do the deep breathing.
Yeah, how so?
I'm not really sure. I definitely do deep breathing on a pretty regular basis, but I think because I was so focused on trying to get my belly to be breathing, I ended up feeling, which is exactly the opposite of what you were suggesting that we do. But I definitely felt like, oh, maybe I'm doing it wrong. And so I wasn't able to actually do the deep breathing in a helpful way until I kind of let go of that part.
Yeah, I think that's so hard because if it's different, it's going to take a little bit of practice. So I appreciate you sharing your experience. This could be different. If you're not used to diaphragmatic breathing, it could be different. So practicing can be helpful. Any other experiences? Okay. Someone said, I take 5 deep breaths in the morning, but it is also useful when you are in stress for a longer period. Yeah, I love that idea, starting the day with just kind of grounding oneself. I think to Emma's point that it is hard to do sometimes if it's new. So I think being able to do this and practice it when we're not so stressed, then we'll be able to depend on it for a coping strategy when we do experience stress. All right, so I'm going to move on to the next part of the presentation. This is more of the cognitive behavioral part, which is my area. I love this because I think it's really cool that we can control the way we think and that can control how we feel. So this has to do with managing anxious thoughts. So I'm going to play a quick video. Let me know when I click on it if you have any trouble with the audio or anything. But this is a really good introduction to what are automatic thoughts, what is this person even talking about, and how can we think about controlling them.
Dr. Lapari, seems like the
Here.
sound is not working.
The sound is not working. Is anyone else having that trouble?
It's hard to hear.
Yeah, I am as well.
I'm sorry. Okay. So I'll get creative and just send the link and then speak to this. Let me just quickly pull out the link. Thank you for letting me know. That could have gone on for a long time.
Sometimes if your headphones is plugged in, the sound doesn't come out.
Okay.
Could be it too.
Okay. So maybe I will try it one more time with the headphones out and let me know if it works. Okay.
Today we're going to talk about
Better?
ATs, also known as automatic thoughts. They're those destructive and reasonably negative thoughts that you have that make things go from bad to worse. Avoiding ATs feels as impossible as avoiding red lights when you're running late. You're going to hit one or two, or every single light from your house to work on that morning that your report's due at 9 a.m. and your boss is already on the edge and you might just get fired and then get evicted and see? Automatic thoughts can pop up and escalate as easy as that. Regardless of reality, ATs are the things that help you build a couple of red lights up to an Armageddon scale catastrophe in a matter of seconds. Today on Wellcast, we're going to show you how to manage those harmful automatic thoughts with healthier, rational ones. And we're going to use our triple R exercise. You are going to record, rationalize, and replace your ATs. But first, how serious are ATs? A study at UCLA shows that people who got caught in cycles of automatic negative thinking became clinically depressed, self-critical, and and less successful in both their work and personal lives. According to Dr. Glenn Scaraldi, these negative, disordered ATs fall into 13 categories, all of which take a toll on your mental health. Here are some of the categories: assuming or mind reading. Like when you are sure someone is mad at you, even though you haven't spoken to them just because they walked in and didn't say hi. Shoulds, must, and oughts. Those are the insane demands that we make upon ourselves in our quest to be impossibly perfect. The fairy tale fantasy, where we demand an ideal for our life and decide that anything less than that ideal just isn't fair. Overgeneralizing. Nobody likes me. I always ruin everything. And finally, catastrophizing. When you take a little problem and turn it into a big, terrible, life-changing event. How do we stop ATs? Good question. And the shorter answer is we don't. But by being conscious of the fact that we're having them and working to replace them with rational thoughts, we can keep them from endangering our mental health. And that is today's exercise. All right, everybody, take out your Wellcast journal. It's time to learn the 3 R's. Step 1, record an upsetting event. When something upsetting happens during the day, describe it in your Wellcast journal and record it in excruciating, painful detail. For example, today I found out that I got a C on my midterm. Step 2, rationalize. Now it's time to think about the automatic thoughts associated with the event. Pause and print this chart. In column 1, write down each AT you had about the upsetting event. For example, I am never going to graduate. In the second column, try and label each distortion. Some ATs might be rational, but most won't be. They'll most often fall into one of the categories we discussed. I am never going to graduate falls into the category of catastrophizing. Step 3, replace. In the third column, respond to each distorted AT. Talk back. Get those negative thoughts off your chest. And if it's hard to do that, try to imagine what you'd say to a friend who is struggling with their own AT and say it to yourself. When you're responding to those ATs, ask yourself some questions like, what's the evidence for this response? Is this a believable outcome for my situation? Will the world end if I get a C on this midterm? Of course not. So as time goes on, and you're more used to responding to your ATs instead of letting them take over your life, you should be able to replace those ugly negative thoughts with more rational ones. Let's recap. To keep your automatic thoughts from ruining your mood and running rampant, you're going to record upsetting events, rationalize them by addressing each irrational thought, and replacing the irrational automatic thought with a rational one. The world is not going to end. Tweet us at WatchWellcast. Email.
All right. Any thoughts or responses out of that video? I just have to figure out how to click to the next slide after this. Okay.
I have something to
Yeah, go ahead.
So I thought this was kind of interesting because for me, I feel like my thoughts are just they accumulate very quickly, like what they were saying. But I felt like I tried something similar to that, though I didn't write it out. I tried to organize it in my mind, so maybe writing it out would help. But I feel like that was kind of exhausting because I was tending to every single thought instead of like what their example was like, oh, just a midterm. And it was like a big general thing that happened. But I found I tried doing that with like multiple thoughts and I was getting very tired of that. So I started doing something a little bit new where I would kind of label these thoughts as like, oh, this is a thought that I'm having, kind of label it and get it out of my mind. And then sometimes if I had a feeling, I would kind of label it as a feeling and then kind of get that out of my mind. So it would clear up the space for me. So I think with like more general, like everyday thoughts, that would help. But I think this is a good strategy for like a big event that happens.
I think that's so lovely and such a good idea. What you're describing is a concept called thought diffusion. And it's really just separating from the thought so that we're not struggling so much with the thought and letting it take over. So I think that is really helpful. That comes from acceptance and commitment therapy. And so if that's useful to you, I think that's something worth looking more into. Um, this is coming from cognitive behavioral therapy. I think what it sounds like what might have happened when you started thinking about one thought is that it sort of spiraled and got worse and worse, and became overwhelming. And so it was better for you to use that thought diffusion approach. Um, I think if you're right, if you write out the thought and if you're able to kind of answer specific questions, which we'll look at together now, that could be a different way to use this approach. I'm gonna, it's not letting me like click through on my PowerPoint, so let me just, I'm gonna exit this, stop sharing, and then I'll reshare in a moment. Sorry, it's really giving me such trouble. I can't quite exit my screen, so bear with me. Okay. All right, I think I found it. Now let me try to reshare. All right, here we are. So I think I encourage you all in this next part to think of some anxious thoughts that you've had about work or school or finding employment in the near future, and even writing one of those thoughts down. As you were watching the video, did anything pop into your mind about, oh, you know what, I've been worried about this and wondering if this one thing that went wrong is going to mean something worse for my future? So take a moment to do that. And as you write that down, I'm not going to highlight each of these, one by one. But what I do want to say, and this was featured in the video a bit, is there's a lot of ways that we get kind of caught in a way of thinking that is not so helpful to us. And I call these thinking traps. Some people call them cognitive distortions, but I think they're just traps. I don't think it's our fault that we think this way. We all have a negative bias, and we get trapped sometimes in using the algorithms that we usually fall upon. It can really exacerbate unhelpful thoughts. So a couple of examples that were highlighted in the video are this idea of catastrophizing. And this is if you predict the future negatively without really considering other possible outcomes. So in other words, one bad thing can mean that everything is going to be ruined. So an example of this related to career and jobs is, I didn't get that interview, so I probably won't get a job at all. That's sort of like a big leap from not getting one interview. Another one that's important to highlight is emotional reasoning. So this is when you think something must be true because you feel it really strongly. So sometimes we let our feelings lead. And so if you feel like really scared or discouraged, you think in your head, well, there must be a reason I feel that way. And then you have a thought that is supporting that feeling. So in other words, in this example, I feel discouraged, therefore my future probably isn't so bright. Another few that I'd like to highlight is our tendency to use a mental filter. So paying more attention to one negative detail instead of seeing the whole picture. This happens a lot. Like if you think about getting a test back, generally we're not looking at every question we got right. We're looking at the one question we got wrong or the few questions we got wrong and sort of kicking ourselves like, oh, I knew that, or I didn't read it carefully enough. And so the example here is, getting one low rating on an evaluation and then thinking, oh, I must be doing a horrible job. My boss hates me. And you're not looking at all the other good feedback that you got. So I would like to just highlight this page, and feel free to take a screenshot of it because I think this can be really helpful. Anytime you're having a negative thought or having a negative feeling, it's usually associated with a thought. And there's a lot of ways we can respond to this. We could just accept that thought is true, but sometimes that's not so helpful because it leaves us in a place of feeling really stressed. So I think it's good to look at the evidence for the thought, but then also be fair to yourself and look at the evidence against the thought. So is there a reason to think that this thought is false? And you all probably wrote down or thought about a thought earlier, so you can use that as your example. Is there evidence that this thought is true? Is there evidence that it's false? Are there other ways the situation could be approached? But sometimes it's helpful to think, what is the worst case that could happen? And how would I cope if that happened? And also, what's the best thing that can happen? And how would I cope with that? Because I think we tend to just envision a negative future. And so we should look at the other way around. Thinking about the most realistic outcome could be a helpful question. Really trying to understand the impact of your negative thought, whether it's been helpful to you to think this way, and then how you might feel about the situation if you change the thought, and then if somebody else that you really cared about had this thought, what advice might you give them? And wondering, what could we be so kind to other people but not really to ourselves? Any questions or thoughts around this way of thinking? This idea of thought challenging? Okay, I don't see anything in the chat. Okay. So I'm going to move on to resources. We've touched upon a lot of really good things today. I think there's a lot of ways that all of you could set different intentions about how you take care of yourself, how you deal with stress. I think coming out of this meeting, I'd love to hear about maybe one thing you think you want to do for yourself, or a new idea that didn't really occur to you. Is anyone willing to share that either over the chat or on video? Marissa said journaling. Any other ideas? It was good to have a reminder of what cognitive distortions or thinking traps look like, so next time I'm anxious, I can chart it out. Good, I'm glad that was helpful. And even if you just Google, thinking traps or cognitive distortions, there's so many good versions of lists like that that really delineate different types of thinking traps. Jasmine said same. Any other takeaways? Anything else that maybe you've been doing, you want to do more of? Okay, I'm gonna move on since no one else is chiming in. I want to share a couple of different resources with you. So here we go. Yes. So I work currently at CAPS, and a lot of people aren't even thinking of doing counseling, even though this is objectively a really stressful time. But we're actually doing all of our psychotherapy and psychiatry treatment online. And that's still a service that is free to you as a student. We could do video appointments or telephone appointments. I wanted to just take a moment to share the contact information for CAPS with you. You can call them at 858-534-3755, or visit the website. You can actually schedule an initial visit with CAPS through the website. Say that you want to do a brief telephone assessment, and as long as you make criteria for that, you can schedule that online, which is pretty cool. Again, it's free counseling. It's brief intermittent therapy. Right now, we are really happy to support the students and be there for them. So we're really eager to, if you want to have a conversation about what all this means for you, if there's any other concern in your life right now, it's an important time to think about counseling. The same number for CAPS is actually the after hours crisis line. So if we're closed, there's still a counselor 24/7 available for consultation. So you just call that same number and press 2 if after hours. And all urgent crises are triaged same day, Monday through Friday. And over the weekend, that number is the number to call for same day consultation and crisis management. If you found today's workshop helpful, if it gave you some new ideas about how to engage in self-care and stress management, there's a lot more that CAPS is doing to support students at this time. Feel free to take a screenshot of this, or it's on our website. These are all the daily drop-in workshops that are being hosted via Zoom from CAPS this quarter. So every single day of the week, there is an opportunity to learn more and to talk about this stuff. A lot of facilitators won't call on you directly. So if you just want to, chime in when you want, or just kind of sit back and learn, that's okay too. There's also a few community open forums that CAPS is conducting over Zoom this quarter. This is a time when it's really hard to connect with other people, so it could be an opportunity where you might not have needed this when you were on campus, to find a home in a community and really connect with others similar to you. And so again, feel free to screenshot this. These are all free online weekly drop-in community forums. You don't have to go every single week. You can just drop in. And then if you're not really sure if you need therapy at the moment, but you want to get a better idea about, how can I integrate mindfulness into my day, or I should probably track my mood. I don't feel so the same as I have been. There's a lot of really helpful online resources on the CAPS website, and these are 3 of them. There's MindWellU, Tao, and WellTrack. I want to leave a couple of minutes for any questions or discussion. If there's something that you found interesting, you want to know more about, feel free to ask. And if not, we can wrap up. Any questions?
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So I've actually been struggling reaching out to people. I think that's probably one of the hardest things for me, because talking to people and being on Zoom has been really draining. So it's been hard for me to keep in contact with people. Do you have any suggestions for that?
So you're saying that doing it over Zoom has been really draining?
Yeah, even just texting people, reaching out to others. It's not that I feel isolated, it's just by the end of the day or whatever, I don't feel like talking to anyone. So I don't know if you have any suggestions for that.
Yeah, I think that's so true, to kind of touch base with yourself and think about what time of the day do you crave that. It sounds like the end of the day you don't, and that's okay. You might need to just engage in self-care at the end of the day. Being on Zoom all day can be really draining. There's ways that maybe you can connect with people throughout the day. It doesn't have to be a long additional Zoom call. It could just be sending a text to a friend and saying, I'm thinking about you, and having them do the same. So I think getting creative about the ways that we're communicating with people could be helpful. Does that answer your question, or is there more that you're wondering about there?
Yeah, I think that answers my question. I do find myself more social during the day as opposed to nighttime. I kind of retreat a little bit to myself. So I think, yeah, scheduling talking to people during the day, I think would definitely be helpful for me. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Any other questions? All right. Well, it was a pleasure to present to all of you today. Zara, Amy, I'm not sure if there's anything else you want to say.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kristen LaPerry, for doing this presentation. I felt that was very useful for me as well, because I also am working from home. And for those of you all who tuned in, thank you so much. Let us know if there are any other ways we can support you. You're always welcome to reach out to the Zone, or again, reach out to the resources that Dr. LaPerry mentioned for CAPS as well. For those who are attending for the Wellbeing Leadership Award, this does count towards your occupational wellness, so you can make sure you track this on your progress tracker as part of your Wellbeing Leadership Award requirements. And again, thank you all so much. If you all don't have any other questions, you're welcome to tune out of the Zoom. We'll be hanging around until folks step out.